think I'd love starting first with asking you something about like your experience conflict mediating.
Yeah.
So with that said, how many years have you been doing that for?
Well, I've been heavy into NVC for about 15 years, I would say. Started around 2010. And it picked up as the years have gone on.
Sure.
And so...
As in the mediating picked up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I get more skilled and as more people heard about my offering it. So I would say probably like 10 to 12 years, something like that.
Right on. And 10 to 12 years, like formally, like where you would like meet people somewhere and like sit down with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
at Earth Haven first.
oh, right.
And then in town,
Sure.
as I moved into offering my services more in town.
Is that still going on, I imagine? Yeah. So how many hours, if you had to guess, like how many hours then do you have of being at a table with...
Well, if you add Zoom,
Oh, well.
which has been in more recent years, I mean, a rough guess, 500?
Sure.
Something like that.
Oh, yeah. Nice. And then even, I imagine informally.
Oh, yeah, a lot more informal.
Right, yeah. I mean, we're always, like humans just are always prone to like being in conflict. I think it's going to be around forever. So, right on. So around 500 hours. Now, next I'd love to hear about how like, well, how many people on average are you mediating with? Are you just like doing like two people at once? Groups?
It's usually two people at a time. Sometimes it's a family, so it'll be 3 or 4. I think the most I've ever done was a family of 5.
Right on.
But it's usually 2, with more couples than anything else.
Sure. Yeah. Any patterns that you've seen specifically in romantic relationships? Like any consistencies?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing is criticism. That people trying to talk about their frustrations and their unmet needs in relationship, but they don't know how to use the language that describes their inner world, sadness and frustrated and scared and needs for respect and care. Since they don't know how to say that, they try to say it through criticism and blame and demands.
Right.
So I would say that's probably the number one thing that causes painful disconnection between people, that they want to learn new patterns of communicating.
Sure.
There's also I want to make a clear distinction between conflict and violence. Okay, so I used to identify, and people used to also label me as conflict averse, because when conflict would come up, I would often get scared. I would have even some trauma reactions at times, and and that was before NVC, but then got into NVC, and one of my early experiences was going to a 10-day intensive that Marshall Rosenburg, the founder of NVC, was one of the directors for it. And it was about 50 people, and we would meet once a day as a group to talk about anything that came up. And so one day, during our big group meeting, there was a conflict between 2 people. And the man on this side was about, I would say, like 3 or 4 people to my right, and the woman on this side was probably about 5 or 6 people on my left, or the other way, yeah. And but they were very skilled in NVC. So they were speaking with intensity, strong feelings, but there was no judgment, criticism, blame, demand. It was all what we call in NVC screaming in giraffe. Well, it wasn't all screaming, but when it got really intense, it was what we call screaming in giraffe, which is something like, I'm so frustrated, or I'm so hurt, I so wanted to be understood. Like, speaking in strong emotions, but connecting it to actual feelings and actual needs,
Yeah.
rather than, how could you be so selfish? Why are you so mean to me? Instead of that kind of violent language.
Right.
And so what I noticed was that my normal response would be to like shrink away when people have loud voices and they're in conflict. But I noticed myself actually leaning forward. And I thought, I have never done this before in my life. I'm leaning forward, going back and forth, fascinated by what these people are saying to each other.
Yeah.
And my partner Terry was with me, and we talked about it afterwards. And she had a similar experience, not as much as I did, but what I realized was that I had never been involved in a conflict that was nonviolent. A conflict where people were talking about their feelings and needs, even in an intense way. So from that experience, and following myself, observing myself more after that, I came to the conclusion, I'm not conflict averse, I'm violence averse.
Sure.
And I think for most people,
Wow.
that's true. Now, some people have had such painful, violent, traumatic, that anybody raises their voice, no matter what they're saying, even if they're saying feelings and needs, they can go into a trauma response. But for most people that I've worked with, like a strong feeling expressed from the heart, as we say in NVC,
Yeah.
is something that most people can handle.
Wow. And I can imagine like being in that moment. You're like literally physically between two people that are in conflict. Like that, when I imagine myself in that scenario and there is like violence involved, right? Like there is like judgments or whatever going on. That really, I will also shrink and just like get the fuck out. I want to flee.
Totally.
But that like,
Totally.
that totally sparks I think like inspiration to hear that you were like literally almost leaning in, like, and feeling safe to do so. And that's a new experience for you. That's cool, man. Nice.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I appreciate the story.
Yeah. It's a
Beautiful.
very powerful moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of makes me even, I certainly at one time labeled myself too as like, well, I get afraid of conflict. I'm like intimidated by conflict or whatever. But that makes me consider reframing that in my own mind, right? Like it's, and now I've had experiences engaging in conflict with people who are like NVC, like very well NVC developed, and there is kind of like this sense that I'm actually getting reeled in by what they're sharing with me, as in like a fishing pole, right? Like I'm actually
curious.
I'm like curious, and I'm like really tender and like wanting to hear about like my good friend and like what went on inside of them when I said X, Y, Z. So how cool, man, to think I'm more of like an aversion to violence than conflict in general.
Yeah. So I just encourage you to pay attention as you're going forward, which it sounds like you are, in each of those situations. Like, when do you have the fight or flight response? When do you have the curiosity response? What's the other person saying or doing? What are the images going on in your mind about what's happening? And you'll see the pattern.
Right. Could you speak to any patterns specifically, like when you're helping people navigate conflict? Any patterns that you see like with men more so than women, or vice versa?
Well, again, it's a little risky to make generalizations like that, because it's not a black and white thing. But in general, women tend to be more able to access their feelings and to find the words to put it in their words. So, and have a harder time doing that. So they'll tend to be in their heads more, and make judgments more easily. So that's one thing. Another is women tend more to go into deference to men, like just being around a man. They'll tend to be quiet, want to be quieter, and let them have the power and the leadership in any particular situation, and be afraid to express themselves if they think it's something the other person, the man, doesn't want to hear.
Right.
That's one thing. There's also, I've noticed a lot around the rate at which men and women will speak. Women will tend to speak faster.
Oh, whoa.
Than men do, especially if you're going to talk about your feeling world. Women generally are more able to have resonance and empathy with what he's feeling, whereas he has a harder time having resonance and empathy with what she's feeling. It's like it's like the level of emotional intelligence in general is higher in women than men.
Right.
But again, that is certainly not across the board.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious to hear more about, like, you named that women do seem to have like more of a capacity for, well, I don't think you said more of a capacity for, but can like maybe easily access empathy. And that's reminded me, man, of like my own recognition with myself lately. That's been like kind of a bummer to come across, which has been, it started like when I first started studying MVC. I think at one point I heard this story that like I should empathize, right? And that very much, I don't know at what moment I heard that, but that very much sank its teeth into me. So it got to the point where I started to notice a pattern of exactly that. That was like, I started to notice, like, because I had this should thought, it was exactly what was disconnecting me from people in the moment of me actually trying to like resolve conflict with them.
Yeah.
And, where am I going with this? So, okay, so yeah, so like I started to really become aware of my own capacity, like, to sincerely like drop into empathizing with somebody. And as that's kind of growing in my awareness, I'm looking around now at a couple of like really prominent like female figures in my life who are like really well NVC trained or really like into NVC, and I compare myself to them and I notice, holy shit, they just seem like they're always down to talk about, like they're always down to hear about my feelings, and I cannot handle it. Or I can't handle it near as much as they could. And that's kind of been, I think I've had like some disappointment around that, because I want to like, I know how rich it feels to connect with people in that way, like of sharing empathy and like really hearing each other. And yeah, I just wonder if as a male, or maybe I'm just not quite there in my skill set yet to be able to like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say how much capacity or potential you actually have for being empathetic in relationships. But that said, I believe it is something that you or anybody can get better at the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like any other skill or intelligence. I think some people are born with a greater potential and a greater ease to cultivate that skill or that intelligence. But I don't think there's any limit as to how empathetic you can become. And I often use this image of that I think that every person is inside of this bubble, and anything that happens within that bubble, they can relate to in an empathetic way. So if someone says, "Hey, you cut in front of me," I can handle that really well. I could say, "Oh, gosh, sorry. Yeah, I want you to please take," etc. I won't be reactive. But then we all have things that are beyond our capacity, that I think of as outside the bubble,
Sure.
are things that we don't have the capacity to relate to empathetically, or another way to say it, that we're not in choice when those things happen, that we go to reactivity, right? So somebody, if someone surprises me, and says something quick and sharp, like, like if I'm out in public and somebody yells something at me, it's beyond my capacity. Or with close relationships. So I think of the practice of it, growing our NVC consciousness is pushing this bubble out further and further to include more of the experiences of my life. Right? So my guess is you've already experienced that in the time that you have been working with cultivating your compassionate consciousness. You've noticed that that's been pushing out. So you can push that out the rest of your life. You can be making that bigger and
the
bigger.
bubble. Dude. Hell yeah. Let's see here. Okay, so on this note still, right, of like my bubble expanding, and on the more specifically on the note of like my story that still sometimes comes up of, oh, I should empathize with this person. Like now is the time to empathize with them. But of course that's not like sincerely like what's going on for me. Any tips on like how to stay connected with my body in that moment and stay connected with like my own what's up for me?
Yeah. Well, should energy, well, let's back up a second to define what do we mean by violence. Like, there's physical violence, there's emotional violence, and so forth. But the simplest definition that we use in NVC is violence is trying to make somebody do something. Okay. Now, protective use of force we do not consider a violence. Like, if you're, beating me up, I would hope that someone would come and pull you off.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
That's protective use of force. But beyond those protective use of force situations, violence is trying to make somebody do something. So we verbally can do this. You should, if you blank, then you should, right? Well, that's a type of violence. That is also when we do that to ourselves, we perceive that as a type of violence. So I should be more empathetic is a type of violence toward ourselves. And also the way that we're wired as human beings is that anytime, maybe not anytime, almost every time, when some force has this should energy to it, demand energy, there's a part of me that resists it across the board.
Yeah.
It's actually, Ken Wilber of integral theory says that that's actually consistent throughout the whole universe. At every level, from a cell to a galaxy, we're playing out this, what they call the horizontal drive, between our need for agency, autonomy, freedom, choice on one end of this continuum, and on the other end over here is what they call communion, which I like to call love, together, belongingness, connection. So every holon, they use the term holon, which simply means part, every part throughout the whole universe at whatever level is every moment of its existence is working out this creative tension between my agency to be myself. I can only be my fullest, best human being if I'm being me, if I'm being authentic to me.
Yeah.
But I can't really be a me unless I have other human beings to be me with. Right? You can't just stick me out in the universe somewhere and I'm floating around being me.
Yeah.
Right? So agency and communion. We're constantly balancing this out. So anytime something threatens my agency, I am wired at the most fundamental level to resist that. Likewise, anything that threatens my communion with others, I also, at the deepest levels of my existence, am wired to resist that. So when I tell myself, I should, there's a part of me that resists that. Or if somebody else tells me that I should, there's a part of me that resists that. So what do we prefer in NVC? We prefer to work through the concept of intention and to translate the I shoulds. I should be more empathetic. Damn it, I should be more empathetic. Okay? Every judgment is a tragic expression of an unmet need, basic NVC belief. So I ask myself, what's the feeling, what's the need behind I should be more empathetic? So let's ask you, what's the feeling, what's the need behind I should be more empathetic?
It seems like just a desire for like the connection. It seems like just a desire for,
That's what I would say too.
Right.
Authentic connection, right? So what's the feelings that go on of I should be, right? So need is connection, you're feeling.
I think there's like disappointment that I'm not.
Okay.
Like a little bit of maybe like embarrassment kind of resonates.
Yeah. So disappointment, embarrassment. I guess also longing would be my guess.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So longing. So then translate that in your own head. So just feel the difference in your body when you say to yourself, I should be more empathetic. So just go ahead and say that to yourself and then feel that.
Okay.
And now say to yourself, I really long for more connection. I really long to be more empathetic.
Wow.
And what did you notice different in your body?
That with the I should, there really is like almost like a retraction, like a tightness.
Yeah, exactly.
And with in naming the longing for, that is so like, there's such a soft, inviting energy to it. Like I want to go forward into that.
Right, so Marshall called that coming back to life.
Whoa. Oh, that's so cool.
That's what he meant by coming back to life. So these thoughts, these violent thoughts we say to ourselves, constrict the flow of energy. And when we translate it into these life-serving thoughts of what we're feeling, what we're needing, what we're wanting, then it activates this flow of energy.
Dude.
So then after you've connected to those feelings and connected to those needs, then you can state some kind of an intention or even make a request for yourself. I just notice how deeply I long for empathetic connection and meaningful connection with people. Right? So I sit with that for a moment. And then I just ask, is there anything arising right now about what I can do to move in that direction? Maybe with a specific person, maybe a developmental skill development, something. So let that intention be kind of the engine for moving yourself toward life-serving actions.
Wow. Okay.
So of course the big mistake that we make, because we've been raised in relatively violent culture, is we think that we can create change by using force.
Right.
Because that's what people did to us. Steve, you'd better do this or else. Steve, you're being lazy, go do this. Right? And so that's what we learn. So if you're my friend, I want you to do something different. I don't know about compassionate skills. And so, that's really rude of you to talk to me like that. Why don't you grow up or whatever? These kind of violent things we say to each other.
Yeah.
And of course they're counterproductive because the part inside of you that pushes back against that is now going to be associating that pain with me. And so there's likely to be another layer of barrier between us.
Right.
Unless you have the skill to translate. If you don't hear, as Marshall would say, never listen to what a violent speaking person has to say.
Yeah.
Listen beneath to what's in their heart. So
Right.
if you can translate that quickly enough into your feelings and needs and my feelings and needs, then it won't do damage to our relationship.
And you just said if you can translate it quickly enough, that really being quick with it, in my experience, has been incredibly benefit. That's, if I don't catch it soon enough, it will sting and
Right.
it will land as
Right.
oh dude,
Right.
painful, whatever.
Yeah. And the analogy that having grown up on a farm, the analogy that I use is to keep the horses in the barn before they get out.
Sure.
If they get out of the barn, then don't pretend that they're not. In other words, if something
Right.
lands for you and it ends up hurting,
Honor.
don't pretend that it doesn't hurt.
Right.
You may want to share that reality with me or not.
Yeah.
But if you can keep the barn door closed fast enough, then it doesn't get to.
Right.
But if it does, if the horses do get out of the barn, then we learn from it, right? So we can learn from any experience.
And then that expands the bubble.
And that expands the bubble.
Oh, dude. Okay, nice. I love the bubble. I think I've heard you mention the bubble metaphor before, but it's really sticking right now. So, nice. Yum. For the people in our lives that aren't trained in any kind of compassionate communication, and that are often like expressing their feelings and needs via like judgments and stuff that feels like this sharp energy directed at us. What's like your approach there, like thought process? I think you already kind of spoke to some
About
of that,
how to
right?
work with people's violent ways that they communicate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, part of it is if you're aware that in this conversation with this person that is likely to happen, is to be more prepared for it.
Sure. Right.
Okay? And which simply means having more ready access to your interpretation skills. Like, I don't do martial arts, but I just imagine that people who learn martial arts, the more that they learn it, the more that they go through life realizing that, oh, here's a situation where my martial art might be called into need here.
Right.
So they're just aware of, and they and then can notice sooner rather than later that, oh, we're starting to move in this direction where my martial art's going to be required here to work with this person's violence. It's very similar.
So do you ever get a sense of your own tension?
Oh yeah.
And like struggling to like work through that?
Yeah. So there are various little tools and techniques that I will use. One of the simplest ones that like is the least obvious actually involves doing some kind of pressure on my hand or on my body. Because what does that do? Pressure, even like on the edge of pain, brings attention to the body.
My God. Yeah.
And there are only three things that we can ever pay attention to. Things outside of us, sensations in our body, or our thoughts.
Right.
Those are the only three things that we can pay attention to. So if I'm like really paying attention to what you're saying, and I'm just letting it come in without filtering it through any NVC lens, then I'm going to very likely hear criticism, blame, judgment, etc.
Right.
Okay? So what I've learned is that I do something like this, or I do something like this with my hands, and my attention is now split. My attention is not fully on what you're saying, which some people might think, well, that means you're not really paying attention.
Sure. Yeah, I could hear that.
But in some situations that would be true, and well, I think in all situations it's true. In some situations it might get in the way of connection, but it actually helps with the connection because I am less open to the violent thoughts that you're communicating to me.
Right.
And so my attention is more split. And I also know I'm doing this because it's a reminder to me to filter what you're saying.
Right. Yeah.
And I also would have a few, like if I'm in a group setting, this is when I first developed this, 10 years ago or so, more than 10 years ago, whatever. When I was at Earth Haven, I was president at Earth Haven, and I was at a lot of meetings, and people would say things at times that were really hard for me to hear. And they weren't saying them to me usually, but were hard. People would say critical or judgmental things.
Sure.
And I realized that this was a lot of my own trauma filters that were at play here. So I would do this with my finger, or I'd have a pen, and I would like be poking myself with a pen. And I had these little mantras that are little phrases that I would say. Like the main one is, I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. Because when we go into fight or flight, some part of us thinks our life is in danger.
Right.
And there was never any life. There was never anything life-threatening.
Right.
What's happening? People might be yelling at each other.
Yeah.
Well, from my childhood, it was not safe.
Right.
You know, I
Yeah.
might get hit and hit hard or something like that. You know, when somebody got mad. So that's one thing. And it's a subset of the category of witness consciousness. Witness consciousness or mindfulness, in this sense, means directing my attention, like the capacity to direct my attention to various places.
Right. It's like choosing where.
Choosing where I'm going to direct my attention.
Right.
Right.
Not having it kind of get locked, like having it choose.
That's right.
In another way.
Yeah. So the 3 areas of attention, things outside of us, or feelings or bodily sensations or thoughts. Within thoughts are divided into life alienating thoughts or life-serving thoughts. So keeping my attention on life-serving thoughts as things are going on with another person. So example, so a life-alienating thought would be something like, you shouldn't be talking to me like that. You know, you're so out of line, dude. You don't know anything about me. All that kind of pushback kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just going to create more conflict between us.
Right.
A life-serving thought might be like, if I turn my attention to myself, might be, what do I want to do right now to care for myself? What am I feeling right now? What am I needing right now? Okay. Life-serving attention or thoughts connected to you might be, I wonder what Opie's feeling right now. I wonder what he's needing right now. I wonder what a good thing for us to do right now to like help navigate this tension. Like, those are all life-serving thoughts. So to notice when I'm in life-alienating thoughts or life-serving thoughts, and to steer my attention toward life-serving thoughts, one of which might be calling time out.
Right.
You know, and say, hey, I'm really triggered right now. I can't be present. Everything that I'm thinking that I want to say I don't think is going to be helpful. So I'd like us to call a time out. And this is what we call attending to capacity, noticing what my capacity is, and making decisions based on authentic capacity. And sometimes I'm going to mourn my capacity. Like maybe you and I are working out something, and I'm noticing that I'm like getting overwhelmed and flooded with my feelings, and I might say, Opie, I'm just like flooded right now, and I just can barely talk, and I just really wish that I could be more present with you because I care about what's going on with you and between us. But I'm going to take about 15 minutes right now to just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Right. So noticing our capacity. So that's one of the ways in the general category of mindfulness practices or witness consciousness is the ability to notice what's happening without being just run by it, but unconsciously triggered by what's happening.
Right.
And some of the other things that our skills are to ask for certain things that will help the situation. So what are some of those? It might be like, Opie, I really want to get what you're saying right now, but it would be so helpful if you could slow down. I'm having a really hard time. Would you please slow down so that I can connect to you more? Right? And so then you might be willing to do that, right? Or what we call chunking things down, using smaller phrases like, hey, wait a minute, I really want to make sure I'm getting what you're saying.
Right.
Could you pause there? Okay, and then I reflect back. Like, okay, going forward, would you please like use smaller chunks and then make sure that I'm getting you, because it's like hard for me when using a lot of words.
Right.
So you slow it down, chunk it down, or you may be using a lot of words and I'm like, whoa, I want to tell you what I'm hearing just to make sure that I'm connecting to you. So that's reflecting back. And then at some point, maybe you've been talking for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, and I'm feeling this urge inside to say something, and I might say, hey, I really want you to tell me everything that's going on for you related to this. But I'm having a hard time now because I got so much inside of me that I want to share. Can you pause there and hear some of what's going on for me now?
Yeah.
Right? Slowing it down. So slow it down, chunk it down, reflect it back, take turns.
Right.
And the last one is gratitude. And this is one of the most powerful but difficult ones to remember during conflict, which is, am I grateful that the other person is telling me what's going on for them? And I've worked with hundreds of couples, and more than just couples, but especially couples over the years. And it's this amazing thing that I've noticed is that they almost always forget to say thank you, like, hey, thanks for sharing that with me. Or someone reflects back, thanks for hearing me. Like, and so they'll almost always forget it. But when I ask them, like if you were here with somebody, I say, hey, Opie, are you grateful that so-and-so just shared their heart with you? And you'd be like, yeah. Would you tell them? Yeah, thanks for sharing with me. Even when people say things that have some hard edge to it, I would say easily 95% of the time.
Wow.
When I ask the person, hey, are you grateful that they just shared? Because a lot of times people come to see me, they haven't been able to have a good, long, deep conversation by themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes for months, sometimes for years. Finally, they come into a room where I give them a process to do. I help hold the container.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly grateful that they're finally being able to talk about it, but still they forget. I give them a sheet, and on the sheet is one of the things it says is express gratitude.
Yeah.
And they'll still forget to do it. And it's what we call the negativity bias.
Right.
So the negativity bias is so strong for us human beings. And so those are the 5 things that I have found are most effective to help a conversation go from disconnecting and painful to more connecting and more ease and flow and harmony.
Right on.
Slow it down, chunk it down, reflect it back, take turns, express gratitude.
Is there ever moments nowadays, like within the past year or so, when you are helping mediate conflict, and something does like maybe kind of like catch you off guard, or when you kind of go like, whoa, okay, when you get like stumped, do you run into that?
Not a lot, because I've been doing it long enough to have kind of a toolbox that I know which item, which tool would be useful in this situation. But if it does happen, when it does happen occasionally, I'll simply own that.
Right.
I'll say something like, y'all, I'm feeling kind of at a loss right now of where to go. And I think that if I could just relax and breathe for a minute or two, that I think some ideas will surface that would be constructive for the situation.
Right on.
I used to try to pretend like that didn't happen and try to like perform as if I was, I got this, no problem. And then I actually learned that it was more effective to just say that that's what's happening and give myself a little more time and spaciousness to let emerge, because it has to do with the more that we relax, the more creativity can emerge.
Right, yeah. Okay, wow. So
I actually recommend that couples or people do that if they're working in conflict, is to build in some quiet time, build in some, I don't mean it can be longer, like 15 minutes or so, but even just a few breaths.
Right.
Because every time that we let we slow down a little bit, we let our body like process this energy, right? And so then we process the energy, these strong feelings and all that, and then the brain can function more creatively, especially the higher functions of the brain. It can come back online,
right,
and we can say more helpful things.
Being a conflict mediator, how often is your capacity to empathize just like running on E?
Not too often, because that usually only happens for me when I am the person in the conflict.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I can pretty easily go to like say you and I are having a conflict, and maybe I did something that didn't meet your needs and you're upset about it. That's when I tend to get more triggered. So that's when I have to work pretty hard,
right,
to like stay in equanimity, keep my brain fully functioning.
Right.
But when it's other people, as long as I can keep it slowed down enough that I can track what's going on,
right,
that's the part that gets difficult. If it starts speeding up and then choo, this person, and people are saying all these things, like I can't hold it all.
Yeah.
It's also not usually good for those people, because my experience is you can really only work through a conflict to the degree that people's bodies can process the feelings. Otherwise, one of the things that tends to happen is the people who are the loudest, who can handle the most violence, verbal violence, are the ones who will dominate the situation, and it's not good,
Right.
for everybody. That doesn't serve anybody in my experience.
Yeah.
So when I try to slow things down, I reassure people, hey, I want everyone to say what they want to say. I'm not trying to stifle anybody's thoughts or feelings here.
Right.
But as your mediator, I'm really wanting to slow this down so that everybody can be heard and everybody can be expressed.
Yeah.
Right? So I reassure people that we're slowing it down, not because there's anybody doing anything bad and wrong, we got to stop him and you should be polite or whatever.
Yeah.
It's about so that what each person has to say can be heard and processed.
Dude, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Right on. That's it. I dig the notice. I dig your notice of, well, it's not so much when I'm outside of a conflict that really drains my fuel tank. That's what I want to call it. It's more so when I'm involved and yeah.
Yeah.
What about, so in the scenario then that you're not in the conflict, have you noticed your capacity for that increase over time, or have you just become more aware of it?
My capacity for all forms of conflict, whether personally involved or not, has definitely increased as I just practiced more and more and just kind of pushed that bubble out more and more.
Yeah. Are you open to speaking a little bit about your own romantic relationship?
Sure.
And how MVC has served you in that? Cool. So my first question is, have you ever picked up and tracked on MVC actually being unhelpful in your own romantic relationship?
Well, it kind of depends what a person means when they say, has NVC been helpful?
Right.
Because NVC is superficially what it is. It's a model of communication. It's a set of principles of how to speak, right?
Yeah.
How to think and how to speak. More importantly, way more importantly than that, it's a consciousness. It's a spirituality. It's a set of intentions about how I want to relate to myself and others. So the most basic way that we say that in NVC is, it's my intention to care about my needs and your needs equally, moment by moment. That's the intention. That's the spirituality of everybody's needs matter.
Yeah.
And so when I'm just using the formula, the classic NVC formula, without the intention, it can be used as a tool of manipulation like anything else.
Right.
Okay? So when people tell me, well, NVC didn't work, it's usually because it was being used as a tool to try to make somebody do something.
Right.
We never try to make anyone do anything with NVC or anything.
Yeah.
Any other tool, we're not trying to make anyone do anything.
Yeah.
Again, I want to make sure people understand protective use of force is a way that is well within the NVC system. So when people say it doesn't work, it's usually because they were using the model of communication without the intention to connect.
Right.
And care about both people's needs equally.
Whoa. So, so in lacking this is bringing me back to my example that I shared a little bit ago of when it was my should thought that I for a while thought, it's literally, why did NVC itself just disconnect me? Why was that in the way? When really now, as I'm taking this information from you and feeling into it, I'm noticing it wasn't necessarily NVC that got in the way there, that caused a disconnect. It is more often than not just my intention
and capacity.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we all have that bubble,
Yeah.
We all have a point at which our capacity cannot respond empathetically to whatever is happening. Sometimes the capacity is fatigue, just running out of physical energy to process emotions.
Right.
Even if it's like all, compassionately expressed,
Yeah.
we just reach a limit.
Right.
Our neurotransmitters or whatever, burn out.
Yep. Yeah.
and we need to rest and we need to eat and whatever to get recharged.
Yep. Yeah. No more fuel in the fire. Besides that 10-day retreat that you named earlier, within the last several years, have you been to any other MVC retreat things?
No, I've gotten so focused on my work and
Nice.
of sharing NVC with people, sharing it within my community, Earth Haven, and doing my classes and mediations and so forth. I look at things and I think that would be cool to attend.
Sure.
But it's just the focus of my life these days is on, I spend a lot of time learning various things, including NVC. And then at some point, then I realize that now my main focus is sharing it back out.
Yeah. Which I imagine has been, in its own way, another source of learning.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned, in fact, I often say that one of the greatest blessings of my life is having the opportunity to share NVC with so many people because I'm constantly refining or deepening my understanding and refining my skills. And it's been a huge blessing. I didn't get this from an NVC trained person, but from a therapist who I had a lot of respect for. She said the only thing that human beings are ever afraid of is to feel their feelings. So anytime we say, I'm afraid that this person is going to do this or not do this, that's first half of the truth. The rest of the truth is, and then I'm going to have difficult feelings.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when we know that that's a possibility, that I might say something or do something and that person's going to react in a way, one of the best things to do is to actually role play that in our minds ahead of time. Right? So I want to work out a conflict with you. So I'm like, okay, in an hour I'm going to go talk to Opie. Okay, what am I concerned that he might say? Well, I might say, hey, when you said that thing, I felt really hurt. And then you might say, well, yeah, that's because you were so out of line. Oh, okay. So what would I say? What would be the empathetic thing that I would say if Opie said that to me? Okay, I would probably say, so sounds like you were really hurt and frustrated and you were really wanting connection at that time when I said that. And so I practice having these things so that when I get there, my neural pathways have been primed to be able to respond effectively rather than just sitting over here with my, like I've practiced, I've worked some of that out ahead of time.
Right.
So that's one of the most important things that a person can do. Go ahead.
To kind of prep for a conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that you can think of that the other person might say,
right,
play it in your mind and come up with an empathetic response, an honest empathetic response that you could say to that so that you don't get caught in your own life alienating responses in your own body.
Right.
He shouldn't talk to me like that. He doesn't care about me. See, that proves he doesn't care about me. Like all that really deep alienating kinds of thoughts that we run in our minds. That's really where the pain comes from. Pain isn't caused. No force, as we say in NVC, no force outside of me is the cause of my feelings.
Right. Yeah.
Right? The cause of my feelings are the images that I create in my head about what you've said or done. Right? So that's the other thing that I can. There's also this really simple but powerful practice that I've developed that I call the yes practice.
Okay.
Which means, okay, so two types of thoughts, life alienating thoughts, life serving thoughts, right? most of us are pretty deeply programmed to go to life-alienating thoughts, given how we've been raised and everything. And most life-alienating thoughts are thoughts that we might call pushing against thoughts.
Okay.
Like, you shouldn't say that, or God, why am I such a jerk? Or that shouldn't have happened. All these pushing against thoughts. Life-serving thoughts are moving toward thoughts. They're life-serving, they're moving toward life thoughts. And so in that split second, when you say something and I'm about to respond, in that split second, if I can direct my thoughts toward life-serving, then I have a way better chance to be able to say something that's going to help with connection. So in that split second, I say to myself, quietly, I don't say it out loud, I say to myself, yes. And now my mind is like, yes, what? Yes, what? Well, in NVC, there's only 3 choices. Self-empathy, honesty, sharing what's going on, or empathy. So you say, Steve, you shouldn't have done that. And I'm ready. I've got myself primed, and I'll just say to myself finally, yes, 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 yes. Then I follow up with that. Yes to what, Steve? What's the yes that you can authentically say here? And the yes might be something like, Opie, I just need to take a couple of breaths right now to just feel my feelings, and then I'll respond. That's one yes. Another yes might be, yes, 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 yes. You get it. You're really frustrated. You were like crazy frustrated when that happened. That's an empathy. So then I follow with some empathy. Or it might be, I might go to an honesty response if I think that would be helpful, which might be like, oh, dude, I'm having such a hard time hearing that right now. I'm having a really hard time. I'm feeling so tense in my body right now. That's an honesty response.
Yeah.
But all 3 of those, an empathy, self-empathy, an honesty, an empathy response, are all likely to be connecting.
Right.
Because they're life-serving thoughts. And it's like, yes is like a gatekeeper. It's an energetic gatekeeper.
Right.
It keeps me from going down the life-alienating thought of, you shouldn't talk like that to me. God damn, I try so hard, and you did Or, I know, man, I fuck up all the time. Just cut me some slack. I don't know why I'm so fucked up. Whatever.
Yeah.
Or, whatever, this infinite number of harmful things that I could say.
Right.
Or not necessarily harmful, but not constructive.
So the yes, am I hearing the yes like a tool per se?
Sure, absolutely.
Is really just like, when timed correctly, it's really just this means to like almost kind of prime your pathways like towards positivity, right? Like, or like some kind of actual like good direction to go.
It's like a gate. It's like, I don't know, the image that's coming to me is like a pinball machine.
Sure, yeah.
When the thing goes one way or another, and the ball either goes into the gutter or it comes back in play.
Right. Oh, how cool.
So yes is a gate that keeps the ball in play.
And that's that tool. The yes tool is to be deployed, like before any response, like before a response.
It's a filter. It's like it's literally between you and I.
Yeah. Right.
And if it's not there, then I'm likely to go into my default mode of like criticizing, judging, blaming.
Yeah.
But if it is there, then it steers the energy toward a creative response.
Right. Hell yeah. The energy of yes. Okay.
I actually, a lot of it was fueled from listening to a guy named Bill Harris, who started an organization called Centerpoint Research. And for like 35 years, he worked with hundreds of thousands of people all around the world. And kind of like a success teacher, coach. He knew a lot about brain science and all this stuff.
Sure.
And one of the most fascinating things I ever heard him say was that in all the thousands of people that he worked with, he was really motivated to try to like determine what are the criteria that leads a person to be successful. And not necessarily successful just in money and possession. Successful meaning they're enjoying their life. Mm-hmm. So what leads a person to be successful? He said there was only one criteria that he found that was universal.
Okay.
And that was the person had a basic orientation, a basic psychological orientation of moving toward what they want rather than pushing against what you don't want.
Right.
Right, so we're back to this thing I talked earlier about the horizontal drive between agency and communion. And so however those people got that skill, maybe they were born with it, maybe they were raised in a certain way or whatever, however they got it, this is how they move their energy toward what I want rather than toward what I don't want. You shouldn't talk to me like that. Or why am I always being friends with jerks like Opie? How come I can't put two sentences together to save my life? How come I can never, have a decent job? How come I'm sleep too much? All those are things about pushing against.
Right.
And every one of those, and this is again one of the reasons why NVC is so powerful, because we turn all of those around into life-serving thoughts.
Right.
God, why am I such a loser? Translate that into feelings and needs, which is what we call life force energy. Get in touch with the life force energy beneath that. The grief of unmet needs and the longing for the beautiful things that I want in my life. So hearing him say that and remembering that an NVC Marshall was very adamant about making a request. Whenever you say a feeling, connect it to a need. Whenever you say a need, connect it to a request. So he was always encouraging people to steer their attention toward requests. Requests of themselves, requests of others. And when you hear most people having conflict, there's actually very few requests being made. There's usually a name calling and judging and demanding.
Yeah.
Even with themselves, when they're talking to themselves, they're talking violently to themselves. So learning to direct our attention toward creative thoughts, moving toward what we want. That is that taps into this very deep power and this life force. And so yes is like one of those gateway or one of those tricks or one of those tips that moves us toward creative thinking.
Dude, nice. And okay, to kind of roll with that, I had a thought come up about like, one of my morning mantras right now is, my Opie requests what he does want, which is just like this same shit, right? Like, and this is something I think I picked up either in one of your classes or listening to a Marshall video on YouTube was, I catch it a lot with, or I catch myself a lot with friends, like when we're in this like flow of connection. I got a couple homies with me. We're like, somebody names like, hey, let's go out to eat, right? And instead of saying in the moment like, well, I don't want to go out to eat. And instead of just like naming that, I've really done like a lot of fine tuning to instead name, I'm actually craving like a walk. Can we do like a walk first? And that really like sharing that and also receiving that, I totally notice a difference in my body. Like when somebody says, I don't want to do that. It's like, okay, motherfucker, like give me some more. Like, what do you want?
I want to be really clear, hearing myself, what I've just been saying, I want to really be clear that I'm not saying to ignore saying what you don't want.
Right.
I think a lot of times it's not necessary and doesn't help anything and sometimes can add, but sometimes it is very important to say what you don't want. But to follow it up with what you do want. Right. So that's why in NVC, requests are always stated in the positive, because telling someone what you don't want doesn't make clear what you do want.
Yeah. Like,
Opie, I just wanted you to be more supportive in our friendship. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
Or I just don't want you to like be dominating the conversations all the time. Okay, well, what do you want?
Right.
So it
Yeah.
may be that it would be important. I may think that it's important for me to tell you that I have this experience of you talking more than I do, and it's frustrating. And it may be important to say that. But then it's really important to say what I do want, which is maybe something like, would you ask me, make sure that every 5 to 10 minutes you ask me what's going on for me in relation to what you're saying?
Sure.
Something like that.
Right. Wow. And so I never even thought, there's times when I'm struggling to name what I do want. And I wonder if in those times I can flicker back to this conversation in this moment and maybe try to say what I don't want and out loud and just try to name it and get it into awareness with that other person. And then say can I have a minute to think about what I do want? Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because I wonder if it could be, I could see it, maybe they're getting maybe there could be confusion if you do, I could almost think of examples of this, of when somebody's isn't quite tracking what I'm saying because I only did request what I do want. And I didn't say what I'm not looking for right now, dude. So, wow.
Sure.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it'd be very important. And also, a very important skill to develop, especially in intimate relationships, is the practice of asking for feedback. Right? So about whatever aspect of your relationship you want to. And there are more formal kind of NVC ways to say that, and there are more kind of colloquial or natural sounding ways to say that. But I really encourage, especially couples or good friends, on a regular basis to say something like, hey, are there anything that I've said or done in the last week or so that was hard for you? I'd love to hear what it was. I'm feeling really open right now, and I'd love to hear it. Now, it's really important that you are able to say it without criticism, judgment, and blame, nonviolently.
Oh, sure.
To learn how to say it nonviolently.
Say my response?
Yes, to answer that question.
Yeah.
In a nonviolent kind of way.
Right.
Meaning free of judgments, criticism, blame, anything that I would hear as criticism, judgment, or blame. But being honest.
Yeah.
And that's a skill that, like a lot of NVC skills, no one ever taught us. And so we have to learn them as adults. How do I give feedback without criticism, judgment, or blame?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so it can be also be said hey, is there any need in our relationship that's not being met as well as you would like? And you'd be like, ooh, good question.
That's a slap.
Yeah, maybe play or maybe touch or whatever it might be. Another one that can be really useful and it's even simpler is, hey, Opie, is there anything that's you're afraid to tell me that's really important? Do you think that would be good for me to know? So, inviting feedback,
right?
Compassionate, nonviolent feedback, so that it builds relationships,
right?
And doesn't fester and erode relationships.
Yes, dude. Okay, so I'd love to name an example which I just lately noticed that I've just kind of automatically kind of opened up a feedback space with myself and friends. So I have this relationship with a woman, and over the past several months, there's been as I think of our relationship in a timeline, I can think of big moments when there's something new that we tried, right? Getting into cuddling was a big one, and I made it a habit to, after those big moments, the next day, 2 days later, follow up with a phone call and ask how was that for you?
Beautiful.
And that, I remember the first time I did that with this person, they were like, this is great. I love that you just followed up like this. And that's when I made the connection. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to do this more often then. because and then we got clear about some things. It's just like it is literally a means to, like requesting feedback. I'm saying is really a means to like intentionally like push the bubble out and like expand your relationship with that person. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to say that communication is like cooking and sex. You got to know what the other person likes.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Like another great conversation to have, you know, in an intimate relationship is something like, hey, if, you know, you do something that like it doesn't meet my needs and I have some uncomfortable feelings, can you tell me how it would be best for me to say that? Like, when would be the best time to bring it up, or how to say that to you, or anything about how you would prefer to have that information shared with you?
Right. Yes. That reminds me of, I've done this, I've done that a couple times now, set up with friends like a code word for like, hey, something's up for me. That feels like a good kind of like soft landing or introduction to a potential conversation about it. Yeah, code words. You got any other ideas on that one?
Well, it's not directly related to your question, but the practice of not waiting till you're asked, but to actually offer that to people. So meaning the feedback thing, like, hey, if I ever do something that like is hard for you, and you want to tell me about it, here's what I think would be my request, is that you let me know ahead of time that you want to have that conversation, like give me like at least a half an hour, so I can kind of get myself together, and then make sure that it's a time when I can be open to it, and preferably to be in a context of doing something that's feeling good to us. Like, you know, if we're having a meal together, or if we're sitting outside in the sun together, like, so have it be in the energy of a connecting, nurturing space,
right,
where I'm in a and also in receptive mode. That's how I would request feedback. And I really do want you to tell me if there's ever anything that happens that I say or do that's hard for you, that it somehow has any kind of blockage between us. I really want you to tell me about that.
Yeah.
And my request is it kind of be in that format, if you can. And I know that sometimes you just gotta, it's just is really strong inside of you, and it's just gonna come out. And so, okay, then I'm fine for you to just bring it up in that way as well. But I really prefer the other way, so that it's more likely that I can really hear you and take it in.
Right, a spaciousness would be so beneficial.
Yeah, so giving and receiving feedback, and having agreements ahead of time about how to give and receive feedback with people.
Whoa. Having agreements ahead of time. Having just kind of like little protocols that could really make for a softer, more easeful and connective conversation.
Absolutely. Like, why are we so afraid of it? All right, so it's such an obvious thing, right? When you think about it, giving and receiving feedback.
Oh, yeah.
It's such an obvious thing. It's like one of those, like, how did I get to be 30, 40, 50, whatever?
Yeah.
And I've never heard any coaching about this, heard any good advice about this, right? And mostly, I think, is because most, if not all, the feedback we've ever heard in our life had some edge of violence to it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're really out of line right now, you know, that's really stupid of you to say that, or, you know, even blaming you for my feelings. You know, you really hurt my feelings when you did that. And so most of us have only associated feedback with violence, painful stuff like that. Now, that doesn't, I'm not saying that if it has pain or uncomfortable feelings to it, that means it's necessarily violent. Not at all. We could be giving each other honest, compassionate feedback, and there still may be some uncomfortable feelings. So it's not about trying to say it in a way to make sure the other person doesn't feel bad. That's never what we're after in NVC. We're never after protecting the other person's feelings. We are after creating a quality of connection. So if I know that if I bring up a certain subject just out of the blue, that you're not likely to be able to handle it, then it wouldn't be very skillful of me to bring it up.
Right.
Not that it's wrong to bring it up by any kind of NVC standard. It's just not going to be skillful.
Right.
And we're not likely to get our needs met.
Something you said there reminded me of how when Marshall would mediate, he would, I thought I heard him say this at one point, that before he would actually get the two people together to mediate, he would sometimes sit down with them and drop into like a role play where he would say, hey, can I role play your partner? And just like totally empathize with you. Just imagine I am them and I just totally empathize with you. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, he developed an empathetic role play as a very powerful tool that he would use with people. So he would do it in different ways. So if you came to me and you had some conflict, with a person, I might role play that person talking to you, right? And then he would turn it around and I would be you and you would be that person. There's a 3-part role play that he developed, which is an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah.
So also sometimes when two people, so like say you were talking to your friend and the two of you come in and want me to help mediate, I may say at some point, Opie, is it all right if I play you right now and tell your friend what I'm thinking is going on for you? And you'd say, yeah, okay. I'd say, and so if there's anything that I'm saying that is not accurate, please stop me. So I will speak from the feelings and the needs and the requests and so forth that are going on for you in a way that you don't know how to say, but that really kind of cuts to the core of what the real issue is here. So sometimes, and again, I learned this from him, I will role play each person because it kind of makes it go more quickly.
Right.
Than having people, it kind of depends how much time we have.
Sure.
Because this is a way to make it go more quickly.
Right. And so I was going to ask you, so you will deploy that.
Absolutely.
In your own practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm usually, 90% right with what I say, because I've been hearing, like if it's you, I've been hearing you say things either now and or in previous sessions.
Right.
And you're having trouble getting at the core of it. That's when I might say, hey, can I be you? And then I might say, I'm just feeling really hurt because I just really want connection. And I just hope that we can find a way to get along with more harmony because I really long for that. And that person can really hear that. Whereas what you were saying was, well, with this and that, and this happened, and blah, and it's like your thoughts are all over the place.
Right.
And like you don't know how to focus it on what's really going on inside you. Then if I role play you, then it kind of steers it right to that deep level. And this person will often say, after I say my thing, they'll look at this person and say, is that true? And they're like often crying, saying, yes, that's true.
Yeah. Oh, how magic. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Huh. Is there any other, besides like the Marshall thing that we just named, like the role, what should we call it?
Well, you can also role play people who have died.
Oh, wow.
So like if you come to me and you have pain in your relationship with one of your parents and they've died, I can play the parent.
My gosh.
And that's been very healing.
Yeah.
For people also.
I can imagine, dude. Holy shit. I didn't really realize the power of role-playing until I started taking your classes. And if you really just like let yourself sink into it, you can totally feel the energy of people's words and yeah.
And sometimes people will say to me, like I'll play their, say their father, and I'll say something really empathetic.
And they'll be like, oh, you never
I'm getting kind of teary just now thinking about doing this because it's so powerful. Anyhow, And I might say something like, Opie, thank you for telling me. Man, I really want to know what's going on inside you. I know I haven't been able to do that in the past, but it's really important for me to hear what's going on in your heart, you know. And a tremendous amount of healing can happen in that. And then sometimes people will say, my dad would never say that. And like, that may be true, but what I said is what was in his heart. He just wasn't able to access it. Now, see, that's an NVC belief.
Yeah.
Some people would not have that same belief, but
Yeah.
it's totally what we have. We have the belief that every human being has the need for every other human being's well-being. And the most satisfying thing for a human being to do is to contribute to life.
Yeah.
The life inside of them, the life inside of others. So that's especially true with people that they're close to. So a parent who's has never been able to empathize because of their training, they got cut off from their feelings and needs and their empathy and all that, that I can actually play that person, and a lot of healing can happen because I believe that I am speaking from that part of them that really does believe that, or did believe that when they were here.
Right. Wow. Any other tools that you use in mediating then? Besides like that?
There's another tool that I use where I have people trade places, trade seats. I usually do this toward the end, after there's been a lot of sharing back and forth.
Whoa.
So people come in and, you know, they're really wanting to be understood about various things, and there's a lot of energy of, I want to tell you what's going on for me kind of thing.
Sure.
And, you know, we slow it down and we chunk it down, and we get a lot of empathy going back and forth between two people. And then I'll notice at some point that there's kind of a relaxation that happens in the body of each of those people. And when it gets to a certain point where I'm comfortable that they have really taken in the other person, I'll say, I want to do a practice right now, if you're willing to. What I'd like to do is ask each of you to get up, sit down in the other person's chair, and from the moment you sit down, I would like everything that you say to be what you think would be coming out of their mouth. So you be that person to the best of your ability. And they're like, okay. most people are happy to do it. I mean, I'm not happy. Most people are willing to do it.
Yeah.
And then what I say is, so person A, would you please tell person B, now they're in their other roles.
Yeah.
Now, would you please tell them what's important to you about what we've been talking about?
Oh my God.
And so you can see their minds working. And what are they doing? They're expanding their prefrontal cortex capacity to take the perspective of the other person.
Dude, holy shit.
It's very powerful.
Wow.
It's very powerful. And so people really, so once they do that, like most of the time people are like, wow, you really do get me. Because you put into words exactly what, now sometimes they don't get it exactly. Sometimes there's something left out or something that was said. And that's often if there hasn't been a full enough,
Like relaxation.
well, a full enough understanding of the depths of the other person.
Okay, yeah.
So it may have been said, and the person may have reflected it back originally, but they didn't really sink in. So that's why it's on my end, it's really important that I guess right, that they're in a place where they have enough mutual understanding of each other, that they say that back to each other.
Right.
So it's a beautiful, powerful way to get more empathy, but also to confirm for me and for them that we have had a successful understanding of each other.
Right. Yeah, it very much feels like what I want to call a bow tie move. Like you just really tie it and say, we did make progress today. Nice.
And if you do it too soon,
Oh God.
if you do it too soon, then when people switch seats, they'll say things like little digs.
Oh fuck, dude. and then you're just back in it. Then you're just like digging the hole deeper. Oh my God.
So I usually wait until I'm like 95% sure that they're ready to do it.
Sure. Ooh, that kind of that inspires a question. Have you noticed the relationship between once the conflict like really is starting to like settle, like there's like the relaxation in people's bodies and there's a softening and there's empathy happening. Have you started to notice the relationship between that moment and what happens afterwards and play and like humor? Like coming in.
Well, most of the people that I work with, like after they leave me, I don't interact with them.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, I can see in the moment what has changed, but it's hard to know what happens as they go back to their life.
Sure.
Unless sometimes they come back to me and they say, wow, after that event, we had like 2 weeks of like total humming. Like everything was just like so smooth and open-hearted and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll say that.
Sure.
But I'm not in their lives enough to know exactly how. But I can see in the moment, I can see the softening.
Yeah.
I can see the trust, care. A lot of that has returned to their connection.
So
how they look at I mean, people come in a lot, they can hardly look at each other. Right? And by the end of the session, they're actually looking at each other, exchanging warm gazes and maybe even touch and so forth.
Yeah. Okay, so what about in your own post-conflict practices then? Do you ever find yourself like making like joking with that person, like poking about the conflict, making jokes about the conflict, kind of thing?
I'm cautious about humor. Not in general. I love humor.
Sure.
My partner Terry and I, it's like one of the funnest things about our relationship is how much we laugh, and we have a similar sense of humor. So I love the humor. I think it's a very important part for some people's relationship. I mean, some people it's just not a thing. That humor's not that important to them.
Yeah.
But I'm cautious about it related to conflict because it can be consciously or unconsciously masking unspoken stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so, in which case, you're avoiding something that would be good to talk about, or you're triggering it to be a little bit more painful. So, conflict in proximity to conflict, I'm very cautious about.
Interesting. Yeah. That checks. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
And if I do feel inclined to make a joke, I might ask.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to poke fun at us
Yeah.
about what we just did. Are you feeling in a space to
receive?
And if they said that, yes, then I might say,
Yeah.
wow, I was such a rainstorm and you were such a turtle.
Yeah.
Which is an analogy from Gay and Catherine Hendricks, who are these relationship experts. They talk about how these two personality types, turtles, when they get scared, they go into their shell, and hailstorms, when they get scared, hail harder. And turtles and hailstorms often find each other, and they torture each other with their defensive behaviors.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God, that sounds awful.
And so it happens a lot, because they're polarities, and polarities often attract, right?
Right.
And so, I at times have poked fun at myself, and I'll like not poke fun at the other person because you just never know.
Yeah.
I'll try to just poke fun, or in a general way, I might poke fun at. Okay, there we did that grumpy old couple thing again, didn't we?
Yeah, I got you. That's great, man. Yeah, I think part of me asks about the play thing, because I've noticed in my own experience that that there has certainly been like pleasant and unpleasant moments after a conflict when I have tried to bring humor into and poke at the person, or even like poking at myself. There's been like unpleasant one, like, oh, this like too soon, right? And even just like yesterday, this is a little bit, the story I'm about to share is like a little bit different context, but I think a similar kind of thing, similar energy applies to it. Myself and this homie of mine have like an ongoing joke that I'm more like a cat in my energy. I'm more like a cat in my boundaries, and he's more like a dog that just always wants to play, right? And is always just like, and is always willing to like try to poke at the boundaries. And there's been moments with this dude when I'm like, when the poking that he does will soften me, and I'll be like, all right, fuck it, you want to play? You want to horse around? You want to smack each other around? Then I'm in. But there is like, this is what's risky about bringing play and humor into things, is there is moments when he's like just trying to play, and I'm like, dude, fuck off, seriously, stop. And yeah, I think I want to share that just to speak to the risk of bringing play into things.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with like people's love languages or connection strategies.
Yeah.
And like for me, I love touch, right? Even during a conflict, most of the time, if we could sit next to each other and just feel our shoulders touching.
Yeah.
And I'll often like want to look away, like not to want to have deep ongoing eye contact.
Yeah.
Because I find it difficult to process what's going on inside when my attention is outward.
Yeah.
Other people can do fine. Whatever's inside of them just comes up and out easily. But the way that I'm wired is like when I'm focusing on this person over there, this gets pushed to the side. Not entirely, but to a large degree. So when I can close my eyes or break eye contact with a person, then I can get in touch with what's going on. And if I can feel the other person next to me, it's soothing and comforting. Okay. Other people like, don't touch me, dude.
Sure. Yeah.
Don't touch me till this is all over.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not. Or people happy to work out a conflict while in a playful kind of mood. You know.
Oh,
Because it helps them with their flow of energy and this and that. So a lot of it has to do with love languages and strategies of connection and knowing each other. You know, it gets back to that. You got to know what somebody wants. You know, and these are the things that we learn. You know, about each other.
Yeah.
Sometimes we learn them in painful ways by doing something, and then the person says, like what you said.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah. Cut the shit, please. Yeah. It reminded me of like one of my own tools that I've just recently come across is walking with the person, going on a walk wherever.
Yes.
Preferably not something too overstimulated.
Right.
Actually, maybe like a hike or something, but just being somewhere where I can like just continue to physically be like moving my body. I'm like naturally a pretty restless person. Right. And that like the lack of eye contact is also incredibly helpful for me.
Yes. A lot of people, that's scary. If you're not looking at them, then they're scared. Yeah. If they're looking at them, then they feel comfort and connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, do you resonate at all with the story of, I have a story that like, it's right, that I should make eye contact with people as much as possible.
Well, I think in general that's an assumption that we have in, you know, society. I mean, not in just casual society, but in terms of like maybe like the personal growth world that you know that you and I swim in. I think there's an assumption in there, like sitting down across from each other and maintaining eye contact is the way to do it. Yeah, like a therapist, you know, and a therapist and making eye contact. And like many things, I think that's an assumption that is often not true. Right. Can I make a pitch for Compassion Camp?
Yes. Oh my God, totally. Please do.
Yeah. So this year is our 8th annual Compassion Camp, which is a 4-day event that we hold out at my community, Earth Haven Eco Village. And it's built around NVC, but also many other things. Any like practices or bodies of knowledge, anything that contributes to a more compassionate world. And we also organize it according to a process called open space, which means everybody who comes has a chance to offer something. There are all these breakout sessions. There's like 3, 6, like maybe 9, 11 or something, like 9 or 11 different breakout sessions we have throughout the 4 days, and like 5 different venues. So that ends up being like 45 or 50 different options that are all presented by people who attend. And then we also have an emphasis on singing and movement and storytelling and meditation and the beautiful land there of trails and stream and so forth. So yeah, I'd love for you to come. I'd love for anybody hearing this to come. It's August 14th through 17th this year, 2025. And you can just go to the School of Integrated Living or just search Compassion Camp 2025.
Right on. I'll find a link to that. I'll put it into the description so they can just easily click on it. I think that'd be a good idea.
Great.
Cool.
All right.
Let's see. Compassion Camp.
One of my cutting edges these days, growing edges, I would say, is around the practice of gratitude. NVC is more known as a model of communication for dealing with conflict.
Yeah.
Both of which are incredibly limiting as to what I think Marshall meant for NVC to be. Because it's a consciousness, primarily, instead of a model of communication, it's a consciousness.
Yeah.
Instead of just working with conflict, it's more about expanding, creating relationships that move both people toward more getting needs met more and more. In fact, he used to say, the purpose of NVC is to make life more wonderful. Well, that includes a lot.
Yeah.
And we do this by creating a quality of connection where everyone's needs are met through compassionate giving. So the purpose of NVC is to make life more wonderful. We do this by creating a quality of connection where everyone's needs are met through compassionate giving. Well, if that's the whole pie, then working with conflict is one piece of that pie. But knowing from my own experience that that's mostly the piece of pie that I have focused on. But the deeper that I get into it, the more I realize, I think of it, there's this diagram that I picked up from this book called The Wellness Workbook. It has arrows pointing in each direction. And this side is the illness side, and this side is the wellness side. And then over here on the illness side, you have symptoms getting worse and worse going to death. And over here, you have this high-level wellness, so most of how we think and operate in our culture is over here. Like, symptoms.
Sure.
He's exhibiting symptoms, whether it's emotional, or psychological, or physical. Now we're going to treat those symptoms. Well, that's great. I certainly want people to have their symptoms treated, for sure.
Yeah.
But what I'm moving to more and more is that, what does it mean to track on wellness? Like, it's not even really like a concept that we have much of in our culture. What does it mean what are the symptoms or what are the signs of high-level wellness? And how can we move ourselves and our relationships to greater and greater high-level wellness? And so, how can we track on needs met and needs unmet in a way that we are communicating? Again, it comes back to this thing of like focusing on what we want instead of what we don't want. It's like, what creates high-level wellness, or what leads to illness, right? So chronic unmet needs leads to illness, whether it's psychological or physical.
Sure.
What pushes us in this direction of wellness? And to me, I would say one of the biggest factors is the practice of gratitude. And you may remember me citing in level 1 this research that says, for an intimate relationship to be sustainable over the long run, you need to have a minimum of 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction.
Right. Yes, I do remember that ratio. I talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the bare minimum. That's just like to break even. So if you really want to thrive. So what does it mean to focus on gratitude? Like, what does that look like? And it's recent for me to like be asking this question. Like, and how to weave it into my life. And so more and more in my classes, I'm weaving in practices of gratitude. There's a website called gratefulness.org, one of my very favorites. Has tons of great resources on there. And they have a fantastic book that they, on 52 weeks of gratefulness or something. It's called Stop, Look, and Go. So as I've been playing with this, I'm like, okay, what are the as many different ways to bring gratitude into my relationships? And so I made a list of 7, and I made a handout that has 7 of these categories in it. And the practice of asking people to share in my gratitude. Right? Either, well, there's just the expressing of the gratitude. Like, so the most basic is tracking on things that you've done that have met my needs and sharing about that with you. Right? Opie, man, the fact that you wanted to do this podcast with me, I just feel so happy and delighted because like it creates connection between us, excitement, meaning and purpose in life and aliveness. And I just think about all the people that might be getting something from this. And that just feels so good. Right? Then there's like edgy things like, hey, would you be willing to share with me something that you're grateful for that I've done for in your life? You know, asking people for gratitude.
Yeah.
Right? And my experience is that most of us are so starved for gratitude, and we don't have the practice. It's not like socially acceptable. It'd be like too weird to go around asking people for gratitude.
Right.
And it often gets lumped with this thing of like fishing for compliments. We are explicitly not asking for compliments. We are asking for heart connection about things that I may have said or done that have met your needs, and you share how you feel about that. That energy. Or I might say, hey, would you share with me like some gratitude about your teachers at the massage school? Like asking people to share gratitude about other things. Right. Focusing on the flow of gratitude, not just what goes on between the two of us, but you and other people sharing that with you and asking for that. So this has been a real growing edge for me that I'm bringing into my practices, into my classes and with my coaching, is asking myself, how can I expand my capacity for gratitude?
In other words, what other strategies can I find to experience gratitude?
Sure. You can like journaling.
Yeah. Right.
Like there's a well-known journaling book. I think it's called 3 Good Things or something like that, where it's like one of the main practices at the end of the day before you go to sleep, you name 3 good things. Right. You just write 3 good things that have happened.
Ooh, and this.
But there's tons of there's kind of an explosion in the last 10, 20 years about gratitude practices. As a culture, we're like getting more sophisticated and more educated around the power of gratitude, and it's really it's inspiring and encouraging to see how this is like really taking off in the world.
Yeah. Can I offer up something that I've
let me add one last thing.
Yeah.
So Marshall was really clear that gratitude is not some ancillary thing. It's actually the core of NVC, because it is the primary place that we get energy for living the compassionate life. So his nickname for gratitude was Giraffe Fuel for Life. The primary source of energy for living the compassionate life is gratitude, given and received. Like both people get fed by gratitude. when it comes from this energy of celebrating life. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So one thing that comes to mind that I practice that I'm just now realizing it is well, I think what feels good about it is because when I do it, I experience like this kind of wash of like, oh, I'm glad I did that. And it's whenever if I can remember to, I try to name, like before I go for a jog, let's say like a run in the forest, I'll name before the run and after the run what needs I'm in service of. So like self-love, self-care, exercise, movement, connection. If I got a friend with me, we'll like just totally stop before we run and afterwards. And specifically afterwards, man, is like when you drop back into that and you think, yeah, we just fucking did that. Yeah, we just like got after it and like ran our asses off through this forest and we're feeling good now. Then like the wash of gratitude comes on. Like, I'm so glad we did this. That has been great. When I can remember to do that, it's been awesome. Yeah. Really scrumptious. The giraffe fuel for life.
Yeah, and this begs this, this deeper question of why are we here as human beings? This is there's a field of inquiry, that's generally called cosmology, which is like, what is your culture's creation story? What's your story about where human beings come from? How we got here, what we're meant to do, that kind of thing. And every culture has always had a cosmology, and it could easily name these things. Our culture, we don't really have an understanding of that. If you ask the average person, like, what's the purpose of being human? And they're like, that's a pretty weird question, dude.
Yeah, it is it's surely depthy. Yeah.
I mean, the closest thing that I've ever had, like growing up, was being Catholic. There were these set Catholic answers. God made me to do this, and God this, and God that, and Jesus, and there were these set beliefs. So there was some cosmology and belief there. I didn't resonate with them after a while.
Yeah.
But at least they was an attempt to try to make a coherent life.
Yeah.
So in my life, I've been very curious about people who have answers to this. And so there's been like 5 major teachers that I've had. And interestingly enough, one of the main things that all of those had in common is the purpose of humanity is to celebrate. My teacher, Thomas Berry, who was an eco-theologian, cultural anthropologist, cultural historian, his way of saying it was, humans are that being in whom the universe reflects on and celebrates itself in a special mode of self-reflexive consciousness. Like, we are here to celebrate. Another teacher, Matthew Fox, the theologian, said that the goal of the spiritual journey is compassion. Compassion is 50% justice making and 50% celebration. And then Marshall also, purpose of NVC is to make life more wonderful. And so gratitude and celebration are the primary energies through which we create this life. So, so this concept of celebration and this concept of gratitude have been really grown in my mind. And so I'm curious about what am I going to do with this? Is there some way that life is wanting me to live this more in my own life and promote this more in terms of ideas that I share with people? So I'm just in the process of like, wow. But I absolutely believe it is one of, if not the biggest missing piece in our whole culture. It's like we don't know why we're here, and when we get distracted or we get sidetracked by things like, well, I'm here to acquire possessions. I'm here to have a lot of status. I'm here to have a lot of money. I'm here so that I impress people, or nothing really conscious about that. And so I just love that these teachers of mine have, got really clear about the centrality of why we're here, and so how can we explore and embrace this individually and collectively.
Right.
That we're here to celebrate and celebrate life, not just myself, but to celebrate all of life. And there was a Cherokee. No, she wasn't Cherokee. There was an Iroquois elder who said in their tradition, they said that the only thing different about us humans is that we can tell stories about everyone else. We can tell stories about all the other animals. That's
Wow, yeah.
We're the ones who tell stories about all the other animals. To me, that's like celebration. That's like the special mode of self-reflexive consciousness, right? So sitting around, sharing, not to be sitting, but gathering as communities, gathering as people to celebrate life and to share stories and inquiries about the celebration of life and the beauty of the earth and the universe and the mystery and the majesty and the awesomeness of life. And if we don't do that, then we're suckers for whatever next thing somebody wants to peddle in our direction.
Yeah. Wow. Hell yeah, dude.